afternoon and welcome to Moments with Pastor E. This is Pastor Idris Webb coming to you from Randolph, Massachusetts. It's so good to be with you. Always a pleasure to come into your homes. Those of you who are on Facebook Live, I ask that you subscribe, share the broadcast so that, your friends could know that Pastor E is in the house. So good afternoon. It's a beautiful afternoon. It's spring, so I hope you're out and about and enjoying some of the nice weather. If not, well, just keep watching Moments with Pastor E. Father, we thank you for this privilege of being here. Thank you for your goodness and your mercies. Thank you for all that you've been to us. We just give your name honor, we give you praise, and we give you glory in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. So, this afternoon, and as you know, those of you who've been following me, I always say my guest is special. So I have a very special person here with me. I have just met her for the very first time. But those of you who watched the broadcast a few weeks ago, her sister, Miss Anjali, was on talking about safety in the home. And so I have the pleasure of having the doctor. And I'm going to give her a few minutes to introduce herself, because like I said, I've just met her for the first time, but I feel like I've known you forever. There's some people you meet, they're so easy to talk to, so we're friends already, right? Okay, so I'm going to give her a minute just to introduce herself, tell you who she is and what she does and all that good stuff, and then we'll have real conversation.
Oh, great. Well, my name is Pramila Dek. I practice in Canton. I'm a family law attorney. I'm also a clinical social worker, and I have a PhD in social work. In my business, I have a boutique forensic mental health practice, and what we do is we focus on high conflict divorces. So people who are in the family courts, mostly high conflict divorces, but people who are in the family courts who are having trouble separating their family in a collaborative way, in a way that really doesn't harm the children. Research is pretty clear that it's not really divorce that will cause harm for your children. It's the conflict between parents that will cause harm, or that may cause harm. And so our goal is to really surround that family and help them through that difficult change. And that could be supporting a child and understanding that they have two homes now, but still one family. It could be helping parents learn how to communicate with one another or make decisions with one another. So I function in that role, and there's a couple of branches that, like different services that we provide to help with that role, but really our goal is to help people transition to a new family life.
All right, you got it. You know her now, right? Okay. So, you may be wondering, so why did you bring this lady on?
I'm wondering the same.
You must be wondering, but I don't think I think you have the answer, because you know that this particular show is not one that I come on and preach. But I understand that life happens and we are all living lives. And our spiritual life, our physical life, and our mental state has to all line up. So we can talk spirituality all day. We can talk about the goodness of God all day, and that is good. And we can talk about prayer. But we also have to talk about the things that affect us as human beings. And as you know, there's the scripture that undergirds this broadcast, and it's in 3 John that says, I wish above all things that ye prosper and be in good health as your soul prospereth. So all of these pieces must work in tandem so that we are whole. Okay? So why do I have you here?
Tell me.
So the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
Divorce is not a new thing to anybody.
Right.
This has been going on for eons, for ages and ages and ages. People come together with all good intentions.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, something happens.
Yeah.
Life changes. People change. People grow apart and all that. So divorce happens. But we're focusing now on around the pandemic. That seemed to have caused a lot of things to come crashing down. Because, I was reading that most people file for divorce around September and December.
So March was when the pandemic, like everybody got closed in March.
Right.
They lasted a couple of months and they're like, get me out.
Right. And then they were saying too, September, people were together, families were together the whole summer.
Yeah.
And in December, people are together for Christmas. And then after that, people are just spending way too much time together, which is what's supposed to happen. But then that sometimes take a toll on families. And we see a lot of that during the pandemic, where people have just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind when you say that. So for families that weren't divorced, that weren't already separated, it was a pressure cooker, right? So there might have been some stress. Everybody was stressed. I don't know if you remember like those initial days. Like,
oh my goodness.
Am I supposed to test? Am I allowed to go to the grocery store? Do I go to CVS to get, do I leave my house? Do I have to, people like wiped down their groceries.
Oh my goodness.
Like it was really scary.
Yeah. I did. We were coming home.
Right.
And I have a daughter who is like, oh my gosh, you had to wipe don't make the mistake of putting one thing away without wiping it down. The stress of that alone for me was like, oh my goodness.
Well, and you're a great example because you and your daughter, it sounds like from that story, had different ways of handling the pandemic. And it doesn't mean either of you were wrong, but you had different tolerances, different stress levels there. And so if you can imagine that, and you guys are like blood relation.
Yes.
If you can imagine a marriage where it would allow you to leave. It's very hard for you to leave your daughter, but society might have said, you could get a divorce if you're not able to solve those disagreements. So we saw people who may have had small fractures in their relationships. Those were really exacerbated by big, scary questions like, do I wipe down my groceries? So for those families, they're stuck in this pressure cooker. And then they started to get divorced, but the courts were backed up. So the courts also were closed. So there was no relief for these families, and there was nobody who was able to help them put together a parenting plan or figure out, or even to work through it if they didn't want to separate. Mental health businesses were also closed. Everybody was closed for a while. So there was a lack of services to support those families. I'm not I'm not very well versed in the field of intimate partner violence, but we saw a lot of, we were very worried for people who were in homes where there might have been violence in the homes. Because, for example, children would go to school, so there was somebody else who was able to keep an eye on these kids, but these kids weren't going to school anymore. Partners weren't going to their jobs, so there was nobody else who had an eye on people who may have been stuck in these homes. So it was a really scary time for a lot of these families that didn't know how to move forward through this pandemic. So the pandemic put people on some trajectories that were really challenging. One is if you were going through a divorce, the courts were stopped. So how do we even move forward, even if we're not all divorces are bad. In fact, most divorces go okay. I work in the top 10% of divorces. So 90% of your divorces, within a couple of years, it's pretty normative conflict, right? Like we can get along, we're okay. But there's this small subset, about 10%, that are in protracted conflict. They are always in court. They are always fighting. If you tell them the sky is blue, the other one's going to say, no, it's red. They're just, that's the group that I work with. Most people are able to say, we're going to go our separate ways. We love our kids. We're going to make decisions that are in the best interest for those kids. But for those families, they were stuck. They couldn't get that resolution. It would have been interesting to see if some of these families wouldn't have needed as much services had they been able to move through the court system and received the aid appropriately if the world hadn't shut down because of the pandemic.
So now, did you start your business after the pandemic, or because I know you're an attorney?
Yeah.
And then how did you transition from being an attorney to a social worker with your PhD in social work? Now you have this business that you are helping people navigate through all kinds of divorce and getting kids back together and families to understand how to walk through this this big D, while keeping the kids happy. So how did you get into this business?
Yeah, so a little career-wise, did my law degree and my master's of social work together.
Oh, okay.
So I went to 2 different schools, but I did it in a 4-year program. So I did like 1 year at my law school, then 1 year in my social work program, and then year 2 I think was in my law school, and then my final year was combined.
You're a bright lady.
Thanks. And the reason why I did that was I always thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
My mother's a lawyer. I feel really confident in that field. I like to public speak. I argue a lot. Like that's kind of a natural leaning for me. But when I was doing that work, I felt like I was part of the problem. So, for example, for family law, somebody would be coming to me and I was advocating for their stance in an adversarial court process, and it felt not right. This is a family. I don't really want to be part of the tearing of that family apart. I really want to be a part of the mending. This happened. Yeah. This wasn't what we wanted. Yeah. We don't need to bring each mudslaying, like let's move forward, let's move through this. I want it to be more on either the preemptive side, so like helping a family before they break, or helping them through that change and realizing, I love to say, 2 homes but 1 family. So sometimes I'll have parents come to me and they say, we're not a family anymore. And I'll say to them, well, who would your kids say is their family? And then they get it when they can put themselves in their kids' perspective and realize that to their kids, it's still their family.
Yeah.
So I started this law and social work, and when I was in my program, I had my legal training, my legal externships, and then I had my social work training and my social work externships, but it wasn't clear how to be 2 people. I didn't know how to be a lawyer and a social worker. So then I went to my PhD in North Carolina. I went to UNC Chapel Hill. And I studied forensic mental health. So I learned how to be a social worker in a legal setting. And so all of the roles that I play, I'm appointed by the court, so a judge will ask me to do a specific role. And I have to be able to talk to attorneys, I have to be able to speak the legalese, and then be able to help families understand, the process of divorce that they're in right now, and also to understand that this pain that they're going through right now is normal and also not forever.
Right.
And how can you guys see through the pain? I often say to people, what attracted you to your co-parent? Because some of the things that attracted you to your co-parent now exist in your child. So when you say to me something like, I hate him or I hate her, you're looking at your child who's 50% of him or her, and it's really helpful to remind that person that there are things about your co-parent that you love, and those things exist in your child. Try to heal the family in that way and get them to really realize that we're here for the kids.
Right, and things may have happened along the way to kind of thwart your view of that person.
Yeah.
But what we need to understand, it's the kids.
It's the kids
that always get caught in the trap. Because I always say, adults, we can bounce back. We can move on with our lives. We can get another partner. We can do whatever we want to do.
Yep.
Or not.
Yep.
Or we can be alone. But for these children who are now torn between 2 people that are constantly going at each other, then what message are you sending to these kids?
Right.
And how do they move on? Can you speak to somebody who may be going through this? And sometimes I don't think people, just decide they want to be mean to each other.
Right.
But sometimes they're going through so much, just the pain of the divorce.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They're going through so much that they don't know how to deal with things in a manner that everybody is, helped.
Yeah. There's so many feelings here, right? So I never wanted this.
Right.
They hurt me.
Right.
Or maybe even I hurt them and I'm embarrassed. Learning how to talk to your co-parent. So I'm angry with you right now. I can't talk to you right now. Let me call you back in 5 minutes. Giving each other distance in that regard. And then people forget that the children are also beings.
I know.
And so you have children, and so you may remember teenagers lie. And so I have a lot of cases where mom will say to me, my child is saying A, B, and C. And then dad will come to me and say, no, she's saying X, Y, and Z. And I'll look at them and I'll say, she's probably telling you both what she knows you want to hear. And even in intact families, that happens. But if you're co-parents that aren't talking, then these kids are or they can get stuck, right? We can lose them in the cracks because the parents aren't talking. These kids are maybe telling two stories, not because they're malicious, but because dad's been hurt. I don't want to hurt him any further. Let me take care of him. Mom's been hurt. I don't want to hurt her any further. I can take care of her. Or even, I just don't want my parents to argue anymore. I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
And then suddenly these parents thinking that they're doing what their kids need because my kids told me A, B, and C, and my kid told me X, Y, and Z, they're suddenly in conflict. All because, these kids are another person in this game.
Right.
So letting the kids know that they don't have to take care of their parents, that mom and dad have got this, you be a kid. Letting parents know that the best thing you can do for kids is to keep the conflict away from them.
Right.
So if a child says to you something even silly like, I want to have purple hair. If your child says to you, I want to have purple hair, if you say yes, but dad says no, suddenly the kid knows who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Right.
And the best thing you could do in that situation would be to say something like, great, mom and dad will talk about it and we'll get back to you.
Right.
And then you're keeping all of this conflict away from the kids. They know nothing. And then you come back and you say, mom and dad have talked about it and you can have purple hair. They don't know who the good guy is, they don't know who the bad guy is, and they just get to be a kid.
Right.
They don't have to worry about, did I make dad feel bad because I asked for purple hair? And same thing with can I go to Paris? Can I travel? Can I join hockey? I need a math tutor. All of these things, mom and dad will talk about it, or mom and mom will talk about it, and we'll get back to you. Allows the kids to just be kids.
Yes.
They're not managing adult feelings.
Right. And people need to know, and I'm going to let you tell people exactly where you are and what you do. And,
Sure.
So, because people need to, give themselves permission to seek help.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the biggest things, especially in our Christian community.
Yeah.
Because I grew up, I'm a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a pastor's home, and in the church where everybody would say to you, well, your issues, you can pray. You can. Yeah, I believe in the power of prayer.
100. Yeah.
100%. But I do believe, and I speak about this all the time on my show, that I do believe that God has given people like you the wisdom to deal with these situations. We can pray. Yeah, go ahead and pray. But, as you go to your PCP, if you have a headache this morning that's totally unbearable, you will not sit there and decide, okay, I'm just going to sit here and maybe it will go away. But you're going to find your doctor and you're going to say, well, I'm consistently having these headaches and I don't know what it is.
Right.
Can you help me?
Right.
But when it comes to our mental health in our Christian community, there was always this stigma that you shouldn't go outside of the church to find help, which is completely, and I think we have come a long way on that. People understand now. I mean, because I have gone to counseling and I'm not afraid to tell anybody that. You know what I mean? Because counseling did save my marriage along with prayer. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, people need to give themselves permission that there is the help out there. And they can get it.
Right. It's so interesting. The stigma in the church maybe, but also just in our society.
Yes,
it's
our
outside
society.
of the church too. And your example even of okay, I have a headache, I'm going to go to my PCP. Outside of there's something wrong with my physical body, I need to go to the doctor, there's also preventative care.
Yes.
So you go to your doctor annually anyways.
Right.
So people can engage in preventative mental health. So going to couples counseling to check under the hood. You have many, many years with your partner, and there are many changes. One of my favorite quotes is something like, you remarry over and over and over again, right? Because the person, I got married when I was 24, so almost a decade ago. So the person that I married a decade ago is different.
It's not the same person.
It's not the same. So I have to choose him over and over again.
Yes.
And there are going to be times when that's challenging.
Right.
It doesn't mean my marriage is at risk.
Right.
It means we have to learn how to talk differently. Our priorities may have changed. My husband and I played a funny game the other day where there was 100 values that we got a deck of cards, and there were 100 values, and those values might have been ambition, success, activism, generosity, honesty, and you laid them out and you figured out, what are the values as us as a couple. And those values might change.
Yeah.
So I have young children right now. My values are really strong. I want to be home with my kids.
Yes.
When they start leaving me and they start having lives of their own, that value might shift and I might now focus on my career. And that might be weird for my husband if he's used to me being home and suddenly I'm on a TV show, right? So
You're here.
I'm here. But so those are conversations.
Yes.
And so it doesn't mean if you get help, there might not even be anything wrong. It
Right.
might just be, this is an important thing for me. My marriage is important.
Yes.
My relationship with my kids is important. And I want to make sure we're communicating well. And all relationships can be
Right.
better. All relationships
Exactly.
can improve.
Exactly. And we don't always have the answers.
Never.
We think that we do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
So, I can do. I've been married almost 37 years.
Yeah.
And, there's still things that, mind you, I won't fight the battles that I fought at 10 years. I'm past that.
Yeah.
Like you said, we're evolving, we're growing, we're in different places. Things that mattered so much at 5 years will not matter
Yeah.
at 30 years.
Yep.
Because we have, but still, you're still learning things about your partner. You don't always know everything about them. So, like you said, you always have to check under the hood.
Yeah.
Make sure if you're going to keep this thing going.
Yeah, it needs maintenance.
It does.
It needs maintenance.
It does. And I think people may have looked at me a little strange and say, you went to counseling? I did.
Yeah.
Because you get to a place where you realize, if I'm going to stay in this marriage and if this is going to be a whole, I have to do something.
Yeah.
Because you feel like, you're losing something here, like, it's not working.
Right.
And so the professional is there.
Yeah.
So you go and see where the nuts and bolts need to be tightened
That's
up,
right.
and I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Because you think you're doing this thing
Yeah.
right,
Right.
and it's all about you.
Yeah.
You know what I
It's
mean?
incredible.
It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right.
Yeah.
I get all the answers here.
Yes.
It was a wake-up call.
No, it's incredible. And it's incredible to hear how the way I might phrase something lands okay on you, but lands poorly on my partner.
Yes.
And so that's a me issue. I have to learn how to communicate better with my partner or differently, or he has different needs than I have. Sometimes people talk about love languages. So like
Yes.
how you express love. I'm a words of affirmation
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
So if my husband comes home and says, thank you for cleaning the kitchen, I feel like $1,000,000.
Yes.
But that's not my husband's love language.
Right.
So he never gives me words of affirmation. So I'm always yelling at him because he never thinks to do
Right,
it.
right.
So we actually also had to go to couples counseling
Right.
just to learn how do you want to show each other appreciation. And frankly, when there's divorce, that doesn't change. Like your co-parent is still doing a lot of work. How do you show each other, even though you're separated?
Apart, yeah.
How lovely that I feel comfortable and safe that my kids, when they're with you, are having a good time,
Yeah.
that they're safe, that
Yeah.
you're looking out for their best interests. You guys still have to maintain that trust in
That's
one
right.
another. And so just because you're no longer married doesn't mean that you're not mom and dad anymore.
But the thing is that people are so, and divorce is a hard thing.
Divorces
we
are so
won't
hard.
sit here and say, it's not difficult. So people are in the angry stages.
Yes.
At the very beginning. I'm not a professional. I'm
Yeah.
just talking from experience. So people are mad at each other.
Yeah.
Because if there must have been a reason why you guys have gotten to this place where you say, I'm done.
Yep.
So there's some bitterness, there's some anger. And sometimes people just can't pull it together and say, okay, these children, I have to watch what I say to them. Because I've seen people who talk about the other person.
That's right.
Or the partner to the children.
Yep.
And I'm like, no. That is so...
That's about the most
that is
harmful thing you
so
can
wrong.
do. Yeah. Because that's mom and dad. That's who
Speak
they
to that.
love. Yeah, that's who they love. That's mom and dad. And also, as I was saying earlier, they're half of that person.
Yes.
So when you say, your dad's selfish, am I selfish too?
Yeah.
Your dad's a jerk. am I a jerk too? Your dad's stupid. Am I stupid too? Because I'm half of my dad. So when you say hurtful words about your co-parent, your kids are hearing it. And then also we have to think about we're modeling for your kids. What sort of relationship do you want your kids to have in the future? How do you want them to handle conflict? So a marriage, a divorce is a conflict. So how do you want them to handle conflict? It doesn't have to be divorce in the future, but when they have a difficult boss, how do you want them to communicate with that difficult boss? And you're right, there's a lot of anger. So some of the skills we teach them is like an emotional thermometer. So 10 being like, I'm boiling mad, I'm seeing red, like I can't even think clearly. 1 might be I'm super withdrawn, like I'm shut down, I can't see anything. If you're at a 10 or you're at a 1, you should not be talking to your co-parent because you're not rational anymore. So you have to be able to read your own emotions and talk when you're at that like 5 zone. And if you're not at that 5 zone, you have to be able to communicate. I'm not able to have this conversation right now. I will address it with you tomorrow. So you let them know that I'm not ignoring you, I'm coming back to this, but I have to take care of me right now. And when you think about kids who are watching that, kids who are watching you give yourself that dignity of taking care of yourself and then also still treating your co-parent with respect. I hear you, I can't do this right now, but I'll come back to it. That's incredible modeling for your kids.
Yes, and I think it's so important to maintain that relationship with parents. Having the kids, loving their parent. You don't have to love that husband anymore.
That's right.
That's entirely up to you. But like you said, remembering that this is this child's parent.
Yeah.
And will always be
Yes.
the parent.
Yes.
So no matter how you try to separate them, at some point in their lives, like you watch those shows, at some point in their life, they are going looking for that other parent.
Yep.
Whether they be adopted or whatever, in a foster home or whatever, part of them feels like, there's something missing.
Something missing. Something I don't know. Something I'm curious about. Well, and so right now with Mother's Day and Father's Day, I'm telling all of my clients, I don't care that you're divorced, but help your kids buy a Mother's Day present for them. Help your kids buy a Father's Day present. Not because you love the father or you love the mother,
you don't
because
have
your
to.
kids.
Yes.
Your kids want to bring
Yes.
something to mom.
Yes.
It could be help them make a card, but your kids feel special when they're able to give a Mother's Day card to mom or a Father's Day card to father. So that you're not doing it for your co-parent. And that's where people get stuck with me, is they'll say things like, she didn't deserve it. She cheated on me. She doesn't deserve that Mother's Day card. And you hear the anger, and I get the anger. And so you try to say, I understand, but the kid wants to give that card. And you can be the bigger person. And when we're thinking about our values and our spirituality, being that bigger person, being that one, that safe haven for the kids, that's your job as mom and dad.
And like you said, understanding you're not doing it. It's not about you anymore.
Nope.
It's about those children.
Those babies.
Those babies. And oh my God, you want to do the best by them.
You do.
So however you can make them, build that great relationship with the other parent, I mean, to me, that's everything.
Yeah.
Because these kids grow up to be wholesome, adults, having their own kids.
Yep.
And God forbid that happens in their relationship.
Yep.
Like you said, how do they then deal with it? They'll deal with it the same way you did.
Yep.
They'll be obnoxious, mad, crazy, and the other parent would be like nothing.
Yep.
But understanding that our children matter.
And they're watching.
Yes.
So they're seeing it all. They're seeing, it's a reflection of you, how you're able to handle conflict, how you're able to treat people. And you want to show your kids the best. You want them to become, this world needs good, generous, kind, successful people in this world. And we as parents, we're those models. We're creating those kids.
Yeah.
And divorce doesn't mean that those kids don't have that opportunity anymore. You can come together for the next generation.
But it's not fair to them either.
It's not fair.
Because it's not their fault that we fell apart.
Yep.
It's not our fault, their fault that we fell out of love and we have to be in 2 separate homes. It's not their fault.
Nope.
So we just have to make it, easier for them so that when they're going to dad, they don't feel like, or when they're going to mom, they don't feel like, oh, do I really want to go there?
Yeah.
they're happy to go.
Yeah, there are some examples that we give about the transition. So if you and I have children and I'm transitioning those kids, if you and I can just wave to each other, even if we're not at this point where I can say, you know, Pastor E, have a great day, have fun with our kids, even a smile and a wave, you know, like when somebody gives you the silent treatment, how you can feel that tension. Can you imagine being like a 6-year-old who's in that tension once a week whenever mom and dad are together? So just the exercise of faking a smile and faking a wave just gives the kids, really, when we do a transition, it's minutes, 5 minutes. And if you can fake it for 5 minutes, you're giving these kids, you're relieving them of this incredible burden. And then we challenge people to think about, okay, so you're going to go to Susie's soccer game. Both of you are going to be there. You're going to support Susie. That's wonderful. Let's say dad stands on the left side of the field and mom stands on the right side of the field. When Susie scores the winning goal, where is Susie going to look? If she looks left, oh, I've betrayed mom. If she looks right, dad's mad. So just being on the same side of the field, even if you're 5 people apart, like all of those little things that we can do as mental health professionals to teach you, like you might not have thought of that right away. The initial reaction might have been both parents are at the game. That's wonderful. But we can take it one step further to relieve the kids of that burden because they feel it everywhere. And if you give them the grace of being able to just look at the right side of the field, honey, we're both there for you. It's pretty incredible.
That is incredible. That is awesome. And you know what I like is seeing, you know, people remarry. And both families are coming together. And why do they do that? They're not doing that because they want to be friends. They're doing that because of all the kids. You know, they now have these extended families and, you know, blended families. And, you know, they're making sure that the kids are okay. So the ex-wife is friends with the current wife. And, you know, everybody's just coming together. And it's so beautiful.
It's beautiful, and we try to remind people you're going to be grandparents together. So like when Susie has her first baby, do you want her to have to pick, you know, who's going to be at the hospital with me? Or on her wedding day, do you want her graduation? Do you want her thinking, can mom and dad behave themselves today? Or do you want her thinking, I'm graduating. It's my wedding day. Like you want her to be able to live her life instead of worrying about, is mom and dad going to be able to handle this? Are mom and dad going to be able to handle this?
So how do you cope doing this work? Do you
my own personal self-care?
Do you love what you do?
I love what I do.
It sounds like it. But after you've seen all of this, because I'm sure you've seen both sides of the spectrum, how do you balance all of this with your own life? You're now leaving the office and you're going home to a husband and little kids. Do you feel like, oh my gosh, when I get home tonight, I'm going to hug these little ones so tight?
Well, sometimes I joke that it makes my marriage stronger because I think, oh, there are crazier people out there. Like if I were to leave him, I couldn't, like he's pretty good. So sometimes I think it makes my marriage stronger, but it does make me grateful. I have mom guilt, which is like I could be home with my kids, but I'm instead doing therapy with somebody else's kids. So I try to balance that. So I actively take off like every other Friday. I started thinking like that would mean I would sleep in, but it really just meant that I wanted to be with my kids. I try to use the same skills that I would use with my therapy kids that I would use with my kids. So when my son, you know, really pushes my buttons, trying to make sure that I'm not in red or 1 before I talk to him, that I'm in that 5, and asking good questions. So I try to bring some of those skills. Self-care wise, I need to work on that. I feel like everybody needs to work on that.
Everybody needs that.
But I'm big on just snuggles. I love snuggles. Baby snuggles are the best.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So you seem to love what you do. So speak to people out here as to really, can they get in touch with you? What can you offer them? You know, and all that stuff.
So my office is in Canton. So we're SD Family Services. We do mostly court-involved families. So what that might mean are anybody who's touched by the family court. So it could be that you've been divorced many years ago. You're divorcing now. We work with kids. We work with the co-parents. We do family therapy. I also get appointed by judges to do really specific roles. So one role that I do is a child custody evaluating.
Okay.
So the judge will appoint me and say, you know, Premila, I'm having trouble making a decision on where this child should live and what the parenting plan would look like. So I do that work. I do something called parent coordination. Well, that's a challenging role, but the court gives me this small amount of judicial authority where if mom and dad can't make a decision together, I get to make the decision, and that decision is binding.
Okay.
I tell parents always, I don't want to be a third parent. I don't know your kids. I
Right.
don't know you. The way I raise my family might be very different than how you want to raise your family. So in those roles, I work really hard to help the parents come to agreements on their own. And then if they can't, I'll say, if you really want me to make this decision, you know, this is the way that I'm leaning. So broadly speaking, the roles we do are therapy, parent coordination, so helping co-parents make decisions together, and child custody evaluations. And we're in Canton.
Yes, she is on
Washington Street.
Washington Street, 793 Washington Street in Canton. And her phone number is 781-789-0676. It's Dr. Deck.
That's right.
And so anything you want to know about, if you're in the court system and you're going through a divorce or, you know, adoption too, right?
Yep.
If you're having trouble deciding, okay, what do we do with these kids? How are we going to manage here? You know, we're getting a divorce, we have these kids, we want them to be whole, we want them to be sound. Dr. Deck will lead you right. I'm sure you've gotten some nuggets from her this afternoon of how, you know, where you need to be. You can't be 10 and you can't be 1. I learned something.
Yay.
Yay. I got that. So I can pass that on to my married daughter, you know, who's pretty good at balancing things at home. So, you know, but, you know, the pandemic has done some bad things, but it also has done some good things for people too, you know, with their families, because my daughter has the privilege now of working at home permanently.
Yep.
Because the company decided we're not doing the brick and mortar anymore.
And it puts things in perspective for a lot of people too. Like
she has 2 little kids, so she gets to drive them to school, you know, take them home from school, and, you know, because she was driving an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
You know, and so they decided, you know, now this is too much, let's do this. So it has worked in a sense for some people, but others, unfortunately, that was not the case. You know, I was reading something very interesting that women had the false sense of security that when the fathers work at home, that they would help out some more during that time. And no offense to fathers, but they're busy working, and you know, mom still, she is the burden of everything, and that leads to, you know, the demise of the family and whatever. So, you know, it was a really sad time for people, but we're so fortunate that we have people like you who could put us back on the right track. And, you know, fortunately, I didn't have little kids to deal with at the time. We were in lockdown, and, you know, it was like my daughter was finishing college at the time. And, you know, my husband got sick. The 3 of us were down with COVID all at the same time.
Oh, no.
So we really bonded over COVID. So I think that brought us closer, because we were the 3 blind mice, you know, like just living
Save
in
me.
Who's gonna give me some water to are you gonna give me some soup? So, you know, so thank you so
thank
much.
You for having me.
This was really great, but I'm gonna give you the last word.
Okay.
So whatever you want to say to people, whatever little bit of advice you want to give, or say, come see me, come see Dr. Deck, whatever.
Definitely come see Dr. Deck, but also you cannot be a good parent if you are a lousy co-parent. I'm gonna leave it there.
We love that.
Drop that mic.
Drop that mic. You can't be a good co-parent.
Good parent.
Good parent.
If you're a lousy co-parent.
Hashtag. Yeah. Drop the mic there. So please take that advice. You know, be
a good parent.
A good parent.
And a good co-parent.
Yes. And always keep in focus the children. Because like I said before, we all can go on as adults. We're tough, you know, we can,
They
even
have
though
one
we're
childhood.
hurting.
They have one childhood.
Yeah, they have one childhood. Make it, you know, make
Yep.
it the best you can.
They only have so many Christmases, so
Yes.
many birthdays. You
Yes.
don't want to spend it fighting over, does mom get to see you on Christmas or
Right,
not?
right.
Put that aside. They get, I mean, childhood's 18 years. They get 18 Christmases. You get
Yes.
18 with them.
Yeah.
Make it count.
Yeah. And that affects how they treat you as well.
Yeah.
As because you get older
Yeah. Do they want to be around you?
and they look at you and they say,
You were mean.
she's so mean and ugly. Just stick her in the nursing home.
They wouldn't say that to us, though, right?
I hope not. We'll just stick that one in a nursing home somewhere. But it does affect them.
Yes,
you
totally.
know, and sometimes, you know, people in nursing facilities and stuff, and you see there's nobody coming to visit. They have nobody, and you wonder
It makes you wonder.
what happened.
It does make you wonder.
And sometimes you get to know a little bit of the history that, well, mom and dad, they weren't really,
Yeah.
they really didn't do right by the children. And although we should be forgiven, you know, there's some kids who will never forget how they were treated.
That's right.
You know, and it's a cycle. So they go on and they may be treating their own kids,
Yeah.
you know, the same way.
Yep.
So, Dr. Deck, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Pastor E.
Yes, I may have you back because you know what? We just scratched the surface.
Thank you.
This afternoon. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation. And to all of you out there, thank you for joining. And I just want to say, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace until next Saturday at 3 p.m. Pastor E saying, I love you. God bless. And thank you again.